Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today on what we hope you'll find to be an informative and useful webinar. My name is Tom Edsel, and I'm the head of the Americas region for GRESB. Our goal for this webinar is to speak directly to all of you, a group of firms who've not yet contributed to GRESB, but making the decision to join a global benchmark is an important one, and we want you to feel supported and confident about your decision. Our agenda today is pretty straightforward. The webinar will have two parts. First, we'll share some firsthand insights and 5 good reasons to consider joining GRESB this year, 2023. And along the way, we'll clear up a few myths that tend to circulate out in the marketplace about the GRESB assessment. Then the second half of this webinar is really all about your questions. And as our audience today is focused on those who are considering joining GRESB for the first time, we believe that the questions any one of you asks will help many. So we're operating under the all questions are good questions sort of rule. Please feel free to drop your questions right into the chat window you have on your screen. I'm also thrilled today to be joined by my 2 colleagues, Dan Winters, Senior Director and Strategic Initiatives, as well as Reed Morgan, Manager of Member Relations here in the Americas. So let's get started. Before we jump in to some of the details, I think it's worth stating at the very top that clearly the ultimate or overall reason any firm joins GRESB is to be part of a vision where the real asset industry plays the leading role in creating a sustainable future. By joining GRESB, you're participating in a global effort that started back in 2009. And now, as you can see on this screen, encompasses over 1,800 real estate funds and their 150,000 individual assets and buildings, as well as over 800 infrastructure funds and assets with almost 2,500 different facilities reporting in. So as you can see on the screen, thousands of your peers in 70 different countries are already engaged in this effort. However, at one point in the past, they were all just like you, sitting there thinking about making the decision to jump in and get going. So that's what we're here to address today. Let me now hand off the call to Dan Winters, who's actually on site with the new GRESB joiner, and he'll also kick off our review of top reasons. Dan, take it away.
Excellent, Tom. Thanks for having me. Greetings, everybody. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm in the office of Penzance. In a moment, I'll try to zoom out. We just had a switch of the cameras here. Penzance is a Washington, D.C., long time. They started in 1996, one of the preeminent firms here in Washington, D.C. They manage capital for many of the institutional investors and participants in the GRESB benchmark, longtime participants. They've got $3.5 billion that they've managed over time, and they've been awarded some LEED Gold accolades for a V4 project that just received certification here in Washington, D.C., one of the first LEED V4 residentials in the entire nation. So they're doing a great job, and they're getting excited to do GRESB. So look, I can't do that with the camera, but here are my friends. There they are. They're looking at the screen up here. And I had a question for them, guys. So you're getting excited or interested in GRESB. Where are you? 1 to 10, right, on this concept?
We're probably about a 9. We are sure that we want to do this. It's more for us about the timing, and is this year the right year, or is it next year? And as we kind of move along our journey, we really want to understand what the time commitment's like and what the whole process will be like for this year, and make that decision whether it's a 2023 or 2024 decision for us.
Interesting. And Mike?
Exact same. Very, very excited though. And this is a great group.
Well, our goal today is to get everybody to an 11. They're at a 9. We're going to go Spinal Tap. So let's move forward. Okay, great. Here we are. So the top reason to join GRESB, right? It's really about starting that journey. And I really like this slide. There's 3 main things to point out. First is so what these are, they're cohorts. So the cohort from 2011, you can see that's the green line over on the far left, and year on year on year, that's this incremental gain. So this cohort's about 40 or 50 that have long-time benchmark members, and you can see that their journey through GRESB has got them, as you know, over in the top echelon. And the similar concept applies. in 2015, we introduced the concept of the grace period. So that had this score, the first year score kind of jumping, but what's happening is people are dark within the system. So that first year score that we're showing here is really their second year score, because the grace period is that first year where people step back and they do some management introspection, and they're now on that journey. So you can year on year on year, you can see this improvement. On the far right of the slide, what jumps out at me is the fact that it's a 3 to 4 year effort to get to where are you today, and then continuously to improve to get to about a 75 or 80. That's really the goal here. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to bust some myths. So the first myth is that, and people won't speak to you unless you have a great score. Not true, right? So it's really, people will be concerned for the folks that are not in the benchmark, right? And so what the benchmark shows is that you're making effort, you're making improvement, and you've got an ESG program. It's not just a single lead building here, it's a more comprehensive throughout the entire portfolio, right? And the whole idea is to improve over time. Find out what those strengths are. There's no better way to understand where you are than to benchmark, see what's happening outside your four walls of your organization, and then set upon this path of continuous improvement. We're going to continue to touch upon these themes throughout. And so with that, let me turn to my colleague, Reed Morgan in Denver. Reed?
Great, thanks, Dan. Let me start with reason number 2 to join GRESB in 2023. The bar is not as high as you might think. So we totally understand the concerns and fears of jumping into something that you've never seen before, or never been practiced at before, and you don't know what that first year is going to look like, and where you're going to fall on the 1 to 100. All very valid concerns. But just to give you a little snapshot of what to expect, a lot of folks in their first year aren't really scoring anywhere on that second half of the bar. They're really on that left side of the bar, that 0 to 50. So it's fairly common. It's very common to get started and see a number below 50 and then start to make that improvement over time. Dan said that so well. This is a journey, and the start of the journey is your first year. As far as effort required and strategies for kind of reducing that ramp up, well, the GRESB assessment is made up of 2 major components. It's the management component and either the performance component or the development component. You can see I've blocked both of those out here to just focus on the management component. One strategy here is to just attack the management component in year 1. Don't even touch your asset data. Don't even look at that kind of part of the solution, but really focus on your management policies, your procedures, your stakeholder engagement, who's responsible in the organization for ESG, and kind of thinking about setting the stage, if you will. This is a great way to go about it, where you just take that year 1, those first 12 months, and look at management, and you'll receive a score out of 30. So you'll look at that, just that component. And then next year, you can focus all your attention on either the performance or the development component, whichever is more relevant to your organization. And that's where you get into collecting the real nitty-gritty granular data of energy, GHG, water, waste, building certifications. It's the heavier lift for sure. And so you're able to kind of spread that out over 2 years. And you can think about your initiation into GRESB over a 24-month period instead of just a 12-month period. This is one way to kind of, like I said, bring that steep startup curve down a little bit. And a lot of our members are taking advantage of this in that first year of just looking at management. So, and to speak to that, a lot of folks on their first year will do very well with management. They're able to write some policies. They're able to get up to speed fairly quickly and take an inventory of what exists and what's already going on. As you can see, that 22 out of 30, pretty impressive. And one other thing I'll mention too, once you've kind of established your management philosophy around ESG in your organization, we have a pre-fill feature where once that's been completed, you can push that over to next year's assessment. So you really can think about chunking this out to go management year 1, take care of it, port it over for the next year, and then really focus on your performance component or development component, depending on your organization. Let's get to a myth bust here. By participating in GRESB, the portfolio will only be compared to big downtown Class A office high-rise portfolios. We hear this quite often, right? This is kind of there's a stigma around, well, if I'm institutional capital, if I'm going for, something like a score for something like GRESB, and then it caters to a certain property type. Well, I'm here to tell you that we're here for every property type and every strategy. So as you can see this list, we're not just core plus, there's value opportunistic in there as well. We've got data centers, industrial distribution, cold storage, the whole gamut. So when you're submitting your assets to be evaluated, they're only going to be compared to similar type assets in the same region of the world. So if you're an industrial warehouse in the US, you'll only be compared to other industrial warehouses in the US for getting your benchmark score. And that's really about comparing like for like, as much as we can, apples for apples. And that's going to be really important to understand. So you're not thinking about, well, gosh, this isn't fair because I don't have the data coverage that this other, property type might, or I can't get a building certification like these other property types might. I totally understand that concern, and we want to make sure that this myth is busted right now, that your property types are being compared to other property types that are similar, and we have the whole gamut involved in the GRESB assessment. So it's not just one type of property that's in the benchmark. So let's move on to number 3 reason to join GRESB in 2023. There's very limited downside. Like I mentioned earlier, you can break this out over a couple of years. Dan alluded to this with the grace period. You saw that graph where scores kind of jumped up for their first year. Well, that's because that's not really their first year. Grace period allows for you to kind of do this behind the cloak of invisibility, if you will. You can go about the whole experience, learn the system, find out what you don't know, and do that all under what we call grace period, where nothing's revealed to anybody. So there aren't investors asking for your score. There aren't, there's no comparison there. It's just for you. It's really an exercise for you to better understand how the assessment works. We also have services before you submit your assessment and then after you submit your assessment to really dive in and understand. The response check, which happens before, is a service that you can select to look at your answers and ask questions. Is this what the question really meant? Does this answer adequately respond to that question? Is this evidence that I'm providing speaking to the question directly, or am I missing something? That's an opportunity for you to sit down with GRESB experts and review the management component, all those questions around, do you have a policy around this? Let me see that policy, upload it here. So there's an opportunity there before you even submit to kind of do a check, a proof of, this looks good, I feel confident about this, and learn in that experience. Once you've gotten your results, we have an opportunity for you to again sit down and do somewhat of a review, a gap analysis, if you will. Where did I miss points? Why did I miss those points? I thought I got that, but now I'm confused. What happened here? And so again, another opportunity. This happens in September, October, or even later if you want, September, October, November. You can sit down, take a good look at it, and really understand it. So when you get started, we have ample opportunity for you to ask questions, to get answers before even you've submitted, and then even after. So low downside to getting started. Let's bust this myth. We talked about grace period. If I participate, investors are going to want to see my score anyway. They're going to try to get around that cloak of invisibility. They really want to see, how did I perform? Well, let me say, I've spoken with so many of our investors, and we're frequently in contact with them and ask them, what do you think about that first year? What do you think about the score? How do you compare? How do you use this information? And time again, I keep hearing them say, yeah, it doesn't really matter. That's not really what we're looking at. We want to see participation. We want to see transparency. We want to see that by participating in GRESB, it signals to us, the investors, that this organization is taking this seriously, that they're doing something about it. So it's far less about where do you fall in the distribution, and especially early on in the journey, it's about, are you looking into these questions? Are you coming up with responses to these questions? Are you integrating what GRESB is discussing into your business operations? So we think about this as an opportunity to learn the language, establish a program, with this multi-year journey kind of philosophy. That first year is about learning. It's a learning experience. let me get to the last reason for me, and then I'll hand it back over to Dan. But reason number four to join GRESB in 2023 is that there are plentiful resources. We have done the best we can to provide support on our website with reference guides, with a scoring document that clearly outlines every indicator, why we ask the question, how to answer it to get all your full points, and then why we think about it that way. So it's a very comprehensive document that really outlines every piece of the assessment, and it's there to educate. It's there to inform. It's there to be used as a reference, as a resource to build your program around what the industry cares about, what the industry is asking for, what investors are saying is important. We also provide training videos. We have an entire member success team that is dedicated to the support of our members. So questions that could be anywhere from how do I log into the portal to what is the specific detail about this indicator that they're asking for? I don't understand the definition of this word. Let me know. Send us an email. We are here to help, and we'll provide answers as best we can quickly. We have webinars that happen, things like this. We have webinars that are happening globally in different regions, regionally specific, topic specific, subject matter experts involved. We're continually putting out their thought leadership around all the topics that are addressed in the GRESB assessment for continuing education, for edification, for pushing the industry forward. We also co-sponsor and brand with our partners. And I have a snapshot here of our partner directory. This is available on our website of partners who are lockstep with GRESB, helping move this industry forward. They are excellent consultants, data solution providers, experts in their specific area of work who consistently year over year support more and more participants like yourselves in the GRESB assessment, along with many other things having to do with ESG. So there's a host of support there available. And each of these partners also is publishing information and thought leadership and hosting their own webinars. And you can find all of that on our website through our events calendar of what's happening, what's going on. All right, I think that's it for me. Unless there's one more myth to bust, I might just hand it over to Dan. I think I'll hand it over to Dan.
Reed, that was great. Every time I do one of these webinars, I learn something. Some things to reinforce that we heard today, that I heard, right? GRESB is a language. It's global best practices, structured non-financial data, and that this alignment is what's happening from the big pension plans down to the big investment banks, then to the local partners. Getting aligned on all of these issues is really what the decade ahead is all about. So I think about, issues like you can't improve what you don't start, get started. Inertia is a blocker. Doing GRESB is the best ESG gap analysis tool that one can find. So that's another reason to get started. And every year is a gap analysis year. Wash, rinse, repeat, up and to the right. That's the goal. So reason number 5 to do GRESB, the organization will be better for it. And we've seen that time and time again. The trap is if you do GRESB and the score in the first year is learning. Okay, so say that score is a 15 or a 20. The trap is 3 years from now having the same score. What you want to do is say, okay, we were learning, and people go in, and particularly in the management component, you're going to look at that risk management section, the RM1 through RM5, right? There's questions about underwriting and due diligence. There's now more questions being put forward about climate and carbon. So do you have a net zero goal? These are the advances that GRESB is making with the industry, with all of our members. So no, the organization will be better off for it. No better time to start than now. So let's look here. So, oh, excellent. So let's go to the Q&A. Let me turn back over to Tom. Tom?
Great. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Reed. Fantastic. So we promised 2 halves to this webinar, and we finished the first half. Not only some live input, thank you so much to the team at Penzance, but also some top reasons why you'll consider jumping in 2023. We'll review those quickly before we wrap up here today. But now it's really about your questions and answers. We want to be here for you. and really try to answer as many as we can. We're getting lots coming in through the chat, as I'm sure you were able to see as well. We got a number that came in during registration. So it's our job to kind of sprinkle these among each other, and Dan and Reed are going to help me answer these. I can make you this commitment. If we don't answer your question here live, it's simply because of time and space, but we know you asked it and we know where you email address, so we can respond to you directly, and we'll try to answer them online if we can afterwards. So let's take the first question that came in. It was a good one. It said, I can see from the GRESB FAQ that there are different types of user access, being assessment participant, member, and partner. Can you please go through what each option entails and what's recommended user access for a first-time participant? So excellent question. I'll take this one the first time. So really, GRESB is an ecosystem. We have a number of different folks who participate, and really the participant access are you managers who are looking to submit and provide information about your ESG programs, as well as consumption data potentially on your assets. So that's participant access, and you would get a participant membership agreement from us, and then you'll be introduced to our online portal where you can actually log in, create an account, and start going through the process of registering yourself, describing your funds and properties, and submitting data. So that's considered a participant. A partner is an organization that would help you with that. So think of consulting firms who would sit as an advisor to you and helping you navigate your internal data sources, how to format it, potentially advise on ways you can either introduce or improve policies that you currently have. So partner access is that. And then investors access. Those are the institutional investors who are looking to learn more about participants and their strategies and their journeys and where they're at and what are the opportunities to improve. They too get portal access, but that is solely for the opportunity to request access from participants to see their data. So really, as a manager looking to submit and describe and share your ESG strategies and progress, participant, for those who look to get data from GRESB as an investor, and then those partners who kind of help everybody along the way. Those are the three different classifications of GRESB members, if you will, and each has their own agreement and discussion. So self-identify yourself into one of those three, and when you reach out to us, we can confirm that with you and certainly get you going on the right path. So I hope that answers the first question there. The next question I wanted to do was to ask of Reed. Reed, there was a question here. What if we select the grace period and find out we're actually quite pleased with our score? How might we then handle that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great issue to have. If you go in with the intention of, well, we're not really sure how this is going to play out, and so we're going to play it kind of cautious, and then you get your benchmark report back and you go, wow, well, that's fantastic. I think I'd like to share this. I'd like to use this. There's a simple toggle. You can switch it in the portal, and you are no longer under grace period, and you are able to share your benchmark report with investors. So that's the process, and it's up to you. And you're more than welcome to make that decision once the benchmark report has come out.
And Reed, that's actually happened several times. So when I think back to 2015 when we first introduced the grace period, and there was a REIT just north of the Washington, D.C. area, and they had been doing lead buildings, and they had a pretty good program, but GRESB was new. Mm-hmm. And they scored quite well, and they were lighting up my email. Would you please, can we turn off that? So that's where the toggle switch came from, and this is a concept that happens more than you would think.
Yep.
Excellent. Dan, the next question is for you. If a company has 10 development projects, but they're all registered as separate legal entities, could these be under one portfolio? Or if 5 of these are considered residential and 5 are considered commercial, could that be divided into 2 portfolios? The goal for this particular person asking the question is not to have 10 projects have to have 10 different portfolios. How can you advise this individual?
It's a great question. So in instances like this, I consider GRESB to be a communication tool, and it's all about what you'd like to communicate. As a developer, you could choose to have all of that as one portfolio, showcasing your body of work as a developer. You may choose to bifurcate based upon those different property types. You definitely don't want to do 10. right? 10 is too much. So 1 or 2 is going to be the direction for that. Once it becomes a standing portfolio, then it's a little bit more rigid as to the rules. Whatever is the single entity that an LP investor is investing in, that's what you want to communicate. They're looking to do carbon footprints, to get that energy, water, waste data, and more non-financial data in a structured way. So whatever that investable entity is for the ongoing portfolio, that's what you want to submit as a developer. You can just submit your body of work, all, or break it up into 2 based on property type.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Excellent. Reed, we'll bounce back to you for this one. There's lots of questions coming in about international standards and connections and so forth. So I guess kind of a 2-part question for you. How would you describe the benefits of obtaining GRESB against other international certifications? And then can you draw a little bit of a link between GRESB, CREM, EU taxonomy, and those types of things that people see in the marketplace?
Yeah, sure thing. So what makes GRESB unique in this space is its focus on the real asset investment universe. So there are many other frameworks that address ESG or talk about climate risk or physical risk, and they all have their place. But what's unique about GRESB is how focused it is on the real assets. So in this real asset investment space, it's kind of it is the preeminent way to talk about ESG, particularly with your investors. So I think it's over the years become kind of the starting point for anyone in infrastructure or real estate to tackle the ESG conversation. And that's really what differentiates it. Now, there's plenty of overlap. We in fact released a product just this past year to look at the similarities between a TCFD report and the GRESB assessment. And there's a whole lot of connection there. So once you've established your process in the GRESB ecosystem, you can actually just spit off a TCFD alignment report to show where you're aligned and where you have gaps. And there's quite a bit of alignment. So as continued frameworks evolve and as new frameworks come about, especially in the regulatory space, we are actively evaluating where we can leverage what's being asked from a GRESB standpoint to report to those regulatory requirements or to inform those other frameworks. The SFDR is a great example of that. In European regulation, which is starting to be enforced this year, we've developed an entire product that is specific for SFDR reporting and leverages a lot of the data that's already being put into the GRESB assessment, so that you're not starting from scratch on your SFDR report, should you need to do that. So that's an example of that. Now, there's many other frameworks out there. There's many other standards out there, ESRS, there's CDP, there's many that are, as I mentioned, continually evolving. And that is part of our standards development process, to understand what's happening, understand what's being asked, how does that interface or how does it not interface, and then how do we evolve the GRESB assessment to continue to take that into consideration. I'll make one other mention here. We do have an additional, so I mentioned the TCFD product and the SFDR product. We last year developed a transition risk report based on the CREM decarbonization pathways. And so this is, again, taking a body of work that was done independent of GRESB and applying it to a portfolio by taking all the GRESB data that's already being put in there by folks like yourselves and running it through this decarbonization pathway to see how are you doing from a transition risk perspective, what's the exposure for this portfolio, and what are our stranding dates that we need to be aware of. Some of you may or may not be familiar with this CREM methodology, but it's becoming more and more popular, and it's becoming more and more relevant globally as it continues to grow in granularity and improving its process. So that's a little bit to the CREM specific question. As far as all the other frameworks, yeah, there are many, as you all well know, and a continued effort is underway to understand how they overlap, drawing bridges to them, connections, and that's an ongoing process.
Great.
It's been pretty clear to GRESB members that if you do GRESB, you have your metrics where you can now feed all of these other things. So it's typically GRESB first, and then have it feed the other, frameworks that are germane to you.
Excellent. Thank you both. That's terrific. So the next question I have, I'm going to pass it off to you, Dan. We've gotten the advice that we should wait another year or two to get things set up before trying to do the GRESB. Is that common conventional wisdom?
That's getting stuck in inertia. No, it's not common, right? So there's two pathways here. One is you don't know what you don't know until you do it. So folks do this. They might get help with a consultant, but if you feel like you need a consultant help, there's no better way to interview those consultants unless you've done the GRESB. You know what you're looking for and the expertise that you need. So you get right in there and you just go. Some people are pleasantly surprised when they receive a great score. Others receive what they are expecting, which is, hey, this is great. We now know where we are. We set our benchmark and we've got this great pathway up and to the right to improve. So get started, get moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Sticking with you, if I can, for another question that's come in. How has joining GRESB impacted money raising for funds? Why do GRESB instead of or alongside SASB, GRI? How have you seen that impact fundraising?
It becomes this communication tool. So one of the points that was made earlier in the webinar is that it's kind of proof positive that you've got a program in place, that there's not an act of sustainability over here and an act of ESG over there, but it's much more programmatic and coordinated. So that becomes a very helpful conversation when you're in and talking with your capital providers. Ultimately, no decision is made solely based upon ESG. It's a spectrum of concepts that you're talking about with your partners, but you're looking for this alignment. And folks that are looking for best in class are very interested in seeing somebody who's in GRESB and working their way up the program. They know what to expect. It's super helpful.
Great. Thank you, Dan. Reed, coming back to you with a question. If I participate only with the management component, as we've talked about today, will my results be compared only with other entities participating only with the management component? What would be my benchmark? How would you respond to that?
Yeah, good question. Your universe of comparison will be dictated by the location of your the location of your firm and the investment style. Since you won't be reporting on assets, we don't break out by asset type or anything like that, since you're just looking at your management. And so your group of comparison will be everybody else who is in the same region and in the same investment strategy. And so that gives you your group, if you will, your benchmark, and you will just be compared to that 0 out of 30. Now, some of those other folks in that group may also be doing the performance, but you will only be compared to that management aspect, that management part that is being reported on by that firm. If that makes sense, you kind of break out the two. There's the whole management side of things and there's the whole performance side of things. And so if you're not playing in the performance space or the development space, then that's not going to be a part of the comparison. So you'll get your 0 out of 30 score and you'll be ranked accordingly to everybody else who's scored a 0 out of 30.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Because I doubled up on Dan, Reed, I'll stick with you. This is going back to the infrastructure side. So let me just make sure I find it here. For infrastructure projects requiring detailed review, for example, of air quality measurements, how is GRESB able to verify this work?
Yeah. So if I step back a little bit and then I'll zoom right into that specific question, the GRESB assessment is voluntary, and there are thousands and thousands and thousands of data points. And so what we have tried to do is to create as many automatic checks as possible. We do have indicators that are manually validated, and then we have indicators that are not validated at all. And so it's up to, in our agreement, as we enter into this relationship, we agree to put best efforts forth to be as honest as we are able to be and as transparent as we're able to be. And so that's the working agreement between data providers and data providers being those who are putting data into the system. That would be the participant members and GRESB. So that's kind of the overarching approach here is we validate as best we can. We put in automatic data checks as best we can. And then there are plenty of indicators that are not checked. And so for this specific one, though, I want to speak to the air quality measurements. For this indicator, there are 3 items that are asked of you: the target for the reporting year, your actual performance for that reporting year, and then your future target. So we do have an automatic validation in this specific indicator that is looking for potential errors in the data entered, but there is no additional evidence required. So we're just looking, do these numbers logically make sense? They come from you, but they need to make sense, right? A target and an actual, there's some logic rules around there that would throw a flag if they were off. So that's specific to that one, but hopefully that was helpful.
Great. Thanks, Reed. Thanks so much. The next question that's come in, and I'll give both Reed and Dan a chance to breathe and grab a drink of water if they need to. It's really about costs. What is the cost related to the real estate assessment? And so I can quickly review with everyone how to best think about this. So yes, there is a fee that people pay to participate in GRESB. Those fees are charged by GRESB. That's nothing to do with any partners or others that you may decide to work with to help kind of get through this journey. And so we really kind of bucket our fees into kind of 3 main areas. The first is really around the assessment, taking the assessment, getting support from the assessment. And so we kind of have what we call an essential group of services that we provide that get you the assessment, which means you get a count in the portal, you get to put all your information in that you can, and you can also select one of the support services that Reed talked about earlier, either getting pre-submission support in our response check or getting post-submission support in our results review. And that is the most common kind of essential, kind of combination of packages that people step into. We also have kind of more of a broader professional grouping of services, which includes everything I just went through. But now it gets into this idea of submitting to other frameworks or helping to comply with other requirements. So this would get you the ability to start using GRESB submissions for both SFDR and TCFD purposes. So a little bit more of a next step for those organizations who want to do more than just kind of the minimum, doing the assessment and making sure it's going well, but they want to leverage it for additional frameworks. And then the third kind of category are really for those organizations who want to make ESG and sustainability a hallmark of their organization. They want as much as they can get from GRESB, kind of with all of our services and support and reporting projects available as well. And so that's more of an enterprise relationship. So there are 3 different kind of buckets that you can come into. Each has a cost. I've described them in increasing orders of cost. And since we work with different regions and different currencies, I'll ask you to reach out to us directly about your situation rather than give any sort of hard numbers out. But think about your own motivation for stepping into GRESB. Is it to do the core kind of essential bit? That would really be the starting point. Do you want to leverage our help in also reporting to SFDR and TCFD? Or do you really want to partner with GRESB to make ESG, kind of a headline component of your organization? All 3 levels we can help you out with, and we'll provide you very specific pricing. So hopefully that gives you some of an answer without getting into currencies and specific dollar amounts. Let me ask another question here. Just came in. Reed, I'll throw this one to you. If we only have partial performance information, would you recommend just reporting on management and possibly development for projects still within development in our first year?
Yeah, awesome question. And I would imagine this is actually probably relevant to almost everyone starting out with GRESB. Nobody has perfect information right off the bat. Nobody has well, I don't know. I can't say nobody. Very few people have everything all kind of, buttoned up before they start GRESB. And so I think the best way to think about this is in the classic no better time to plant a tree than today. You'll learn so much by going through this. And if you defer on the performance or development side, you'll miss out on those learnings this year, and you'll get them next year. So I would encourage you to dive in and go for it. Maybe you only have half of your assets. Maybe there's only a handful. You only have 10% data coverage on all of your assets. But you know what? Going through the exercise is going to be really, really helpful. And you'll get a partial score, and that's okay, right? We already kind of went through that process of nobody's really kind of holding your feet to the fire on what your first year score is, but you'll learn so much. And I think Tom alluded to this earlier too, with exploring relationships with partners and looking for support. You will be so much better educated by going through this experience. When you sit down to look at potentially hiring a consultant, if that's a direction you want to go or a path you're interested in, you'll be able to speak so much more to the areas that you want to focus on, where you know you need help, where you feel like you kind of already have a lockdown. It's going to be so valuable to you to be sitting in that chair 1 year after having done the whole thing. Then kind of, starting at the beginning of the journey with a big question mark of, I think we just need to kind of think about this. So I would say go for it. Even with partial data, you're going to learn a lot, and it's going to be really valuable.
I've seen people come in with 20% data. Next year, it's like 45 to 50%. It's really difficult to get 100%, but it's the homework. Fill it in, do it the next year, the third year, watch that bucket get full. That's the spirit behind GRESB.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So just keeping a very close watch on the clock, I think I'll leave just the last couple minutes here for a wrap up. I do want to acknowledge there have been some additional questions. Some of them are very specific about comparisons to other vendors and so forth. Again, we have your information. We will get you an answer, but just want to be very conscious of the time we have with everyone. So let me just proceed on here a little bit to our next slide here. If I can ask Inga to get the slides back up for us. That would be great. Thank you very much. So really in summary, the reasons you might want to think about getting involved with GRESB soon, if not this year, it's really about starting a journey. As I mentioned before, the only difference between the folks in this webinar and the over 1,800 real estate and 800 infrastructure funds we have is that they made the decision to go for it, and they made a decision to jump in, and you can make that decision as well. The bar may not be as high as you think on getting involved. It's really about starting it and learning, and that process itself will improve your experience and the results as well. There is limited downside with things like the grace period and even a 1 year agreement. If you wanted to work with us and just look at it as a 1 year, that's an option you have as well. And all of the support that Rita talked about, it's plentiful between the response checks and the results reviews, our partners, the volumes and volumes of information that are available from us and elsewhere. There are plenty who've gone ahead and can give you good advice and tips. And then the organization will be better off for it. I think that's one of the things that has struck me most about getting more involved with GRESB and meeting with many of our current clients, is they've talked about it as being really something they look back on and saying, we're not sure we would have gotten ourselves to this point if we didn't have this structure and this process with which to kind of push us and look to our peers to challenge us to continue to do better. And I think that's a tremendous reflection upon what the experience has meant for them. So based upon what we've said today, if you're ready to get started or closer and you want to talk more, there's really two ways to do it. If you haven't really been close in touch with someone at GRESB, please just send an email to info@gresb.com, mention you listened in on the webinar, make sure we have your location, and someone will get back to you and pick you up right from where you're thinking now to where you go forward. If you have been in touch with anyone from the GRESB team and still have access to their contact information, reach right back out to them. They'd be happy to hear from you. And again, mention you were just on this webinar and you're leaning towards getting started soon. So either way, we would be thrilled to have you and have you join, as I mentioned, thousands of your peers across 70 countries to move not only the industry, but really the whole world forward. And we're so thrilled to be part of this effort and so thankful for all of you for having joined today. So on behalf of my colleagues, Reed, Dan, a number of people behind the scenes, thank you so much for joining. And we look forward to talking to you all soon.